Welcome back. Thank you for joining this week's episode of Luxe Insider with me, your host Anita Khatri. We have a new guest on today's episode. But before I introduce him, here is a roundup on the latest in the world of luxury. Last week saw another interesting collaboration in the world of NFTs: Barbie, Balma, and blockchain. What do you think? The collaboration brings together both a digital and physical collection. Among the tangible pieces of the collection are 50 ready to wear pieces and accessories. Balma's exaggerated aesthetic looks phenomenal on Barbie with oodles of pink. The NFTs, on the other hand, will feature three one of kind Barbie and Ken avatars. Bidding for the Balma Barbie NFTs began on Tuesday, January 11th, on the Metal Creations website. The ready to wear and accessories collection will be available from today, January 13th, at Balma stores and online. Continuing the trend of collaborations founded by rapper Kanye West, now known as Ye West, his brand Yeezy brings Balenciaga to the masses by way of a new collection designed for American mall retailer Gap. It's all about targeting the young customer, isn't it? Yeezy Gap, engineered by Balenciaga, announced on Friday, is expected to drop its first pieces in June. Stay tuned. Now, moving on to our guest this week. I'm joined by a dear friend, Olivier Bernheim, the president of luxury Swiss watch brand RaymondWeil. I'm sure many of the listeners would either own a RaymondWeil watch or have heard about this brand. I first met Olivier in 1998 during the first years of my travels to the watch exhibitions. I was also fortunate to meet Mr. Raymond Weil himself, the founder of the brand. For me, meeting the brand owner at that time, when I had just entered the world of watches, was nothing less exciting than meeting Amitabh Bachchan. What I'm trying to say is that I was super excited to meet the man that had created the brand itself. I presume that an interaction with him would help me learn and understand about the world of watches. Little did I know that I would meet many such owners responsible for creation of a global brand. Let's say I was so raw and young. Not that I'm old, but surely matured. In fact, this is the only brand that I have been able to observe move smoothly into its third generation. What I mean is that Mr. Weil to Olivier, and now with Olivier's son, Elie Bernheim. Olivier is a very good listener, and when I met him, I was surprised to discover Olivier's love for India. If you met him for the first time, you would not guess the knowledge he has about our country. For those of my listeners who are hearing about the brand for the first time, let me quickly tell you about RaymondWeil. In 1976, the Swiss watch industry was facing a crisis with the popularity of quartz watches. It was then where Mr. Raymond Weil decided to start his own company to bring luxury Swiss watchmaking within the reach of a wider public and turn his vision of what Swiss watchmaking should be into mechanical timepieces that would bring a new dimension to this industry. A few years after the creation of Raymond Weil and at the request of his father-in-law, Mr. Raymond Weil, Olivier Bernheim joined the watch company in 1982. His dynamism and visionary entrepreneurial spirit contributed to Raymond Weil's impact on the watchmaking world. Without wasting any more time, let's welcome Olivier and hear straight from him. Olivier, thank you. Can you tell our listeners what does Raymond Weil stand for?
Yes, good afternoon. Raymond Weil stands since 1976 under the vision of my father-in-law, as you said, Mr. Raymond Weil himself, as affordable luxury watches. It became an iconic name in the watch industry, and Mr. Weil was able to set his company immediately around the world. because of, I would say, three key elements: price, quality, and most important, design.
And when it comes to India, what has Raymond Weil's journey in India been like?
Mr. Weil always was passionate about India. I myself became passionate about India and came first in India in 1978 for my honeymoon trip with my wife. And my father-in-law was, from previous job, very knowledgeable about India and had a very dear friend at that time, Mr. M.P. Goel. So Raymond Weil first came into India in 1978. At that time, it was quite harsh and difficult to get into the Indian market, but because of the help of his friend, Mr. Goel, the brand was somehow known very quickly on the market because it was the only affordable luxury quality watch that was important. When I say important, it's interesting to mention that it couldn't be imported as full watches. It had to be imported as CKD. And today, all the big names, the big shots in India, the key retailers have started, I would say, and I can say their fame. They've started their business because they were doing Raymond Weil. So Raymond Weil somehow is at the very origin of luxury suite watches being in India. Raymond Weil is anchored in India.
Totally agree with you, because until early 2000, the taxation didn't allow us to import the watches which were valued above rupees 35,000 rupees. So you're absolutely right. It was difficult, and I clearly remember that Goel family was passionate, also equally passionate about Raymond Weil in those days, until, of course, the things changed slowly and steadily in 2000 onwards. Till date, Raymond Weil has remained independent brand. How have you managed to have this independence in spite of the major groups taking over different brands in the Swiss watch industry?
I think it's the most interesting part in my job. It's probably today the most important and interesting part of my son Eli job. I mean, keeping on as an independent brand is a daily challenge. It's something that you dare to succeed with. You wouldn't fail. So I mean, every day, every morning when we wake up, we have to remain what's the DNA of the brand. The DNA of the brand is friendly, contact, knowledgeable, close to the market, very listening to customers. I mean, none of us believe it can work without the information, without a close contact with the network. It's a mentality. To remain independent, you need somehow to be born in a family where it's part of the DNA. So it's a challenge, but that makes us so different to the others. And I'm sure a lot of end consumers, whenever they buy Raymond Weil or whenever they got recommended to Raymond Weil, they understand how much inheritage I have inherited from my father-in-law. My son has inherited from him, but also from me. And there is a continuity. There is a continuity in the knowledge, how to manufacture, how to design, and what does an end consumer expect. We are not trying to reinvent the world because we are just a new manager being pushed at the head of the company. No, we try to keep on. It's like a wave. It's like a permanent vision. We're always trying to be visionary for the future.
Very well explained, Oliver. During this process, there would have been several learnings that you must have encountered in continuing to remain independent. Can you just share with us one or two learnings which are most important ones?
Probably four words: care, dedicate, stability, and continuity. That's what we have to keep in mind at all time, because that's how people perceive us. That's how people identify themselves to Raymond Weil. That's why they understand that only a family that has inherited of so much watch knowledge can be able today to produce and offer to the market such a high quality watch at an affordable price. Remember that 3/4 of our employees are just dedicated when one talk about production, to quality control. There is no probably better quality than our quality at Raymond Weil, but we managed to sell it at an affordable price.
I remember last when I met you in September, we were discussing about pandemic and how pandemic has impacted the world of watches. And you mentioned to me that Raymond Weil and some of the other brands have done very well in spite of the pandemic. Can you elaborate how has pandemic impacted and how has Raymond Weil survived or sailed through this pandemic?
I must say, Anita, you remember quite well what I did say to you, but there is one element that I have somehow to adjust. Everyone, Raymond Weil being part of, has been extremely hit from, I would say, March 2020 up to probably something like October 2020. There was no way one could have avoided the pandemic. Stores were closed. There was no contact. There was no customer coming into the stores. But this has pushed us at Raymond Weil to try and figure out what the future could be. What would be the key elements that we have to keep from the past, and what are the new that we have to add in our way of working, way of thinking, way of managing the company. And my son has done a tremendous job in refreshing, I would say, the company. The company that you would look at today is nearly totally different to the one in the past. 2021, I must say, is an incredible year, and is due to all the efforts, everything, and the fact that we have kept confidence that the world will come back into a positive trend again. So, bad or good, our pandemic has been terrible. There are so many deaths toll in the world, but somehow pushed us to reorganize, restructure, and be thirdly better than ever before the pandemic.
And how has India been so far?
India, we have, that we have one very, very strong partner in India, Ethos. And 2021, equally to what I said before for the world of Raymond Weil, has been an excellent year in India. Yes.
That's great to hear. Do you think the communication and marketing platform also changed in recent times due to pandemic?
Yes, very much. The pandemic ended a cyclus. Today, our marketing investments are somehow 75 to 80% on digital and only 20% on traditional channels. This allows us to act with more spontaneity and to be in the present moment. With social media channels, our community is informed of our launches in life, and they certainly can react directly to it. We also receive the reaction of our customers almost straight away about product, partnerships, etc. It's a big change. It's a completely different way of talking to the end consumers. And that's how you reach the youth. That's how one can reach the customer for the future.
Certainly, the brand has come closer to the customer, for sure.
Thank you for having that feeling. At least we have succeeded with you. We hope we succeeded with all.
No, no, no. Of course you succeed. You know that. You know that. Let our listeners hear from you, straight from you. What is the connect between Raymond Weil and music?
I mean, when I came into the company in 1983, there was no such sponsoring, donation, and so on. And I said to my father-in-law, we need to give names to our watches. I was not fan of soccer. I was not fan of boxing. I was not fan of rugby. But my wife is a professional pianist. So I got the idea that we should go into the music. That's something that was my passion. It was my wife's job. And we were going to operas and concerts absolutely every time. And one day we went to Paris with my mother-in-law and listened to a theater piece called Amadeus about the life of Mozart. We didn't know there would be a movie called Amadeus. And we decided we would nickname our first watch with the musical name Amadeus. And only afterwards we discovered that there was a film by Milos Forman. And when he contacted us to do a joint launch around the world, it was absolutely unique. But believe me, 1983, a royal premiere in London with Lady Di and Prince Charles, and around the world joint launch, there was no cost. It was just a shake hand. That's how sponsorship started in the watch industry. And I think we anchored this in the market prior to everybody else.
Now, coming to talk about watches, let's, we know the Beatles Watch. What an achievement. Can you tell our audience, our listeners, more about this Beatles Watch?
No, of course. We are very proud of this partnership with the most rock band of the world. Our collaboration with them, with the Beatles, began in 2016. And we recently launched our fourth Beatles collaboration, the Maestro Skeleton Let It Be edition. It's for the first time that one of our Maestro models came equipped with a skeleton movement. It's a self-winding watch. It's a self-winding timepiece with 38 hours power reserve. And it's created in celebration of the UK and the legendary brand. It's also interesting because if you remember what we said before, Raymond Weil came into India in 1978. At that time, it was purely quartz. And I would even say before the pandemic, it was still, the majority was quartz. Today, the vast majority of what we produce, even for women, is automatic, self-winding. So that kind of partnership that we developed with the Beatles is precious and is key for Raymond Weil to associate itself and be different to the others. It shows common goals like innovation, passion, creativity, and reinforces the notion of heritage, which is important for any family-owned brand, family-owned company. Believe me or not, we were not aware, but the Beatles have just released a new documentary called Get Back about the backstage. It's on their last album, and it's also on Disney Plus platform. It has a huge success these weeks and a very large audience. It shows more than ever the importance for us to focus on transgenerational models. That's how we believe the market expect us to be better than the others, to be different to the others. And when I was talking about continuity, you know that music has always been my dream for Raymond Weil. And Ellie now, my son, does it wonderfully and continues with the same spirit. And we have an immense project for next year, which is again going to be on music. And again, It's a partnership which originated and will originate if it's signed from the group, from the musician, not us going to them.
Thank you. Thank you, Oliver, for explaining it. We see a trend on unisex watches. What are your plans for this?
You know, life is a sort of cyclus. It goes, it comes, it goes, it comes back, and so on. When I started in the business in 1982, 83, unisex watches were very fashionable. Italian men were wearing unisex watches. And I remember that Spanish ladies, and I'm going back to 1983, probably 1983 to the 90s. Spanish ladies were wearing unisex watches. So the same watch, we were selling the same watch in Italy to a man that we were selling in Spain to a woman. So we have done it in the past. And understanding from our end consumer through social media and so on that there is a request. It's on our drawing board for next year development. I mean, we have already received prototypes because we listen to our community and we know that today women want to have big models on their wrist. They actually like to wear their husband watch and vice versa. For men, the trend is now also on lowercase size. I think it expands by far too much. And this is a good opportunity to make watchmaking sound fun too, and to open it to a younger generation. Again, we try to be trendsetter. And again, we're trying to be very early on the market with our newnesses.
Fantastic. We look forward to seeing these pieces this year. Are there any do's and don'ts that you can share with our listeners that will help improve the longevity of their timepieces?
Oh, yes. I mean, it's like anything. I mean, if you want to keep your shoes, you should put wax. If you should want to keep your car, you have to bring it to the service. I mean, a watch is something that you need to care about, and you need to be very, very careful about it, and you need to get it serviced in a RaymondWeil service center from time to time, depending on the watch. I would say from between 3 to 4 years. Every 3 to 4 years, you need to get your watch serviced and polished and so on, so it can last. Yes.
So, talking about servicing is a good amount of money, which we experience that customers generally hesitate, and they don't really service the watch until there's something wrong with the watch. Are you suggesting that the servicing of the watch should be a maintenance factor, that every 3 to 4 years the watch should be serviced?
As far as self-winding watch and automatic watch is concerned, I would recommend it, yes, of course.
Can you share with our listeners which fashion brands do you love to team with your RaymondWeil timepieces?
We don't like to team with any fashion brand because RaymondWeil is not fashion. I talk about longevity, I talk about history, I talk about continuity. RaymondWeil is all about quality, craftsmanship. It's not fashion. RaymondWeil is not fashion. If RaymondWeil would be fashionable, RaymondWeil wouldn't be a family-owned business, which is now run by the third generation.
So you saying that when you wear a RaymondWeil watch, you can wear any other watch, any other fashion brand, but your RaymondWeil is not fashion. So you can just pair your RaymondWeil watch with any brand that you're wearing in fashion.
Yes, because my RaymondWeil watch is a timepiece. It's a unique timepiece. It has a unique design. It has a unique quality. There is, of course.
What inspires you beyond watchmaking? Is there anything that you are passionate other than watchmaking, Oliver?
I'm passionate about my family. I'm passionate about my grandchildren. And I'm passionate about music. I'm passionate about traveling. And I'm passionate about skiing and horseback riding. That's keep my life full. There is not enough time in the day just to do everything I wish to do.
Who's your inspiration or what inspires you?
What inspired me? I think I would raise the question: where do I get my inspiration? I get my inspiration whenever I'm on my horse, whenever I ski, or whenever I have a total freedom just to look at nature. That's when I get the most of my thinking done.
And which is your favorite Raymond Weil timepiece?
That's the most difficult question. It's always the latest newness, because every year, I mean, for the last, I started 40 years ago, and I try to wear every year a new one. And the one I wear is the one that I've, for so many years, developed myself, or be behind the development today. It's what my son is developing. So I'm going on with the our trend, and I'm always so passionate about the newness. So I'm changing my watch every year, but there is one that I love very much, and I keep always for doing sport, is a Nabucco. Otherwise, I go into freelancer skeleton watches. I think skeleton is where Raymond Weil today can show the most its quality, its craftsmanship, how much it's dedicated to creativity. And when you see a skeleton watch, you sort of breathe with your watch. You sort of just admire it every day. It's a timepiece. It's unique, and at an affordable price. Again and again, I wouldn't stop repeating it.
Yes, indeed. You can actually see the heartbeat. So, for sure. And is there any luxury item that you aspire to own this year?
I think it's years after years, always the same. A private jet. And you know why? Because I'm so impatient. I was born impatient. I'm impatient. And I hate waiting. So that's my dream. And my dream comes through somehow, because one of my sons is a professional pilot and does a lot of flying, and I often fly with him. But I would love to have one totally private to me, not his.
I'm sure that you will get there, Oliver.
And thank you, Anita, for raising those excellent questions.
Most welcome. Our pleasure. Thank you for your time. And that was Olivier Bernheim. With that, it's a wrap on this week's episode. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast if you have not already. I'll be back next week with a new episode and a new guest. Until then,